sporting showdown there's been in modern times. Maybe George Foreman versus Muhammad Ali, maybe Steffi Graf versus Martina Navratilova, maybe England versus Germany, or the Lions versus the Wallabies, I don't know. I guess the reason the big showdowns are so riveting is because they're about someone much greater than me. I mean, if I just wanted to watch a video of me, I'd go and just dig out an old home video. It's slightly embarrassing. I'd probably be the only person who was interested in it. And it would be very interesting, really. The most compelling showdowns are those which aren't about me, but which are about a hero who makes me go, wow. Today's Bible reading is the first round of a huge showdown. It is the fight of the millennium, perhaps more. And we are invested in it. If we're Christians, then we're a bit like those ancient Hebrews who were slaves in Egypt, because God is rescuing us as He rescued them for the promised land through His chosen rescuer. We're on God's team. And yet it's not first and foremost about me, it is first and foremost about this great hero, the Lord. Now, what's the point of these plays? Why not just go straight to the rescue? What's the point of the plays? Well, 3 times in our Bible reading, God tells us the point. Chapter 7, verse 5, He says so that the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. Chapter 7, verse 17, by this you will know that I am the Lord. And chapter 8, verse 10, so that they may know there is no one like the Lord our God. Here is the great hero who makes this showdown so compelling. Let's just catch up with where we are. We've seen that God's people, the Hebrews, are slaves in ancient Egypt. And God has sent Moses and his brother, his spokesman Aaron, to say to Pharaoh, let my people go, to rescue God's people for that land that God had promised to their ancestors. Now, since last week's sermon, there's been a family tree. You might think, how strange. In the middle of this wonderful rescue story, to have a family tree. Why was that? Well, because it was the family tree of Moses, and especially of his spokesman brother Aaron. And it was as if to show that Team Aaron Moses really do qualify for this great showdown. They've got the qualification rounds, and they're really there because they ought to be there. And yet the real winner is not Team Aaron Moses. The real winner is the Lord. Well, if you only remember one thing today, let it be this. The Lord wins, and we're going to see that in 3 ways. First, the Lord wins versus Pharaoh. The Lord wins versus Pharaoh. Our Bible reading is like round 1 of a massive boxing match. I don't know if you're into boxing. I understand that Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua may or may not have a big fight on this summer in Saudi Arabia. Well, I think a boxing match like that starts with a weigh-in, doesn't it? Where the boxers go and they get weighed. Most of us might be a bit embarrassed by that, but it seems to be rather special for them. And they confront each other, there's lots of razzmatazz and drama. Well, this starts in verses 8 to 13 with the razzmatazz of the weigh-in. First, the Lord steps on the scales through his representatives, Moses and Aaron. And what a way to flex their muscles as they throw a staff down on the floor, and instantly the stick turns into a snake. Well, then Pharaoh, he steps up onto the scales. And these fighters seem to match each other pound for pound. Each of them through their representative, Pharaoh through his magicians. As with demonic power, they too turn sticks into snakes. It looks like a good match, but the way it ends with a clear one. Can you imagine the gruesome scene? As Aaron, Moses' snake, slithers over to the magician's snakes and just swallows them up. If I was Pharaoh, I'd step down now. The Lord is going to win versus Pharaoh. Well, so begins a series of 10 plays. The 10 plays can usually be divided into 3 rounds of 3 plays or 3 punches. 3 rounds of 3 punches, followed by 1 knockout blow. And each round of 3 plays begins in the morning. In each round, with the first play or punch, God says to Moses and Aaron, confront Pharaoh. With the second one, God says, go to Pharaoh. And the third punch always comes without a warning. We're focusing today on the first round, the first 3 plays, although we couldn't look at any of the plays to find the same point that God wins versus Pharaoh. Now, God's very first punch draws blood. Can you catch the scene? Chapter 7, verse 15. Let's see, 7 verse 15. Go to Pharaoh in the morning, and as he goes out to the river, confront him on the bank of the Nile, and take in your hand a staff that was changed into a snake. There they are. I've never been to Egypt, but I imagine the Nile is this vast river, and this morning maybe the sun is rising crimson over the river, and there they are, ready for the first round of the showdown. Pharaoh and Moses and Aaron. And Moses says, let my people go. He essentially says, let my people go or else. But as Pharaoh won't move an inch, Moses lifts up his staff over the Nile, and instantly the river turns into blood. Can you get your head around this vast river, the Nile, is full not of water but of blood, and overnight the fish die. And it's not just the river, it's disgusting. There is blood in the ponds, there is blood in the basins, blood in the bath, blood in the kitchen. It's disgusting. There is blood everywhere. And the only way the Egyptians can get fresh water is by digging. The Lord's first punch draws blood. Well, the second punch gets Pharaoh hopping mad. Chapter 8, verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say to him, this is what the Lord says, let my people go, so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will send a plague of frogs on your whole country. Let my people go or else. And again, when Pharaoh apparently refuses, Moses lifts up his staff over the river again. This time he turns it not to blood, but this whole sea of frogs come jumping and leaping and hopping out of the Nile. It's extraordinary. Imagine Pharaoh maybe just going to his room for a siesta, and what's this on my toothbrush perched there? It's a frog. What is this? Crawling all over my floor. It's covered in frogs. What is this? Trampolining under my sheet, my bed sheet. It is a frog. And it says, verse 3, they will come up into your palace and your bedroom and your beds. The Lord is totally winning versus Pharaoh. Let my people go. But Pharaoh still says no. So the third punch comes without a warning. It's a plague of gnats. Now, one commentator said very rudely, I think, that these plagues remind him of Scotland. Darkness, giant hailstones, gnats. I don't think that's fair at all. But imagine these gnats. Okay, so Aaron lifts up the staff, not over the water this time, but over the land, over the dusty, the red. Is it desert in Egypt? Anyway, he lifts it over the land. And suddenly, the whole land of dust just turns into gnats. Can you imagine? Everyone is covered in itchy, scratchy gnats. It is awful. The Lord wins versus Pharaoh. But still Pharaoh says no. He's really stubborn. And you might think, actually Pharaoh's resistance is quite impressive, you might think. As actually with every punch, Pharaoh's heart grows harder. In the first 6 plagues, every time it says that Pharaoh's heart was hard, or that he hardened his heart. And yet each time it also says his hardness of heart was just as the Lord had said. 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 Back in chapter 7, verse 3, God had said, I will harden Pharaoh's heart chapters 7, 8 and 9, God confirms Pharaoh's choices by hardening his heart. Now that doesn't take away Pharaoh's responsibility. He's not a robot here. He had a free choice. And yet the Bible is clear that one way or another, God is sovereign. Sometimes when we struggle sometimes to fit together God's sovereignty and our responsibility, the proper response is humbly just to go, wow, God is incredible. And maybe we're thinking, Reuben, I know this story. We've learned this in Sunday school. We've taught this in Sunday school. And we're in danger of these plagues just washing over our heads. Let's just be careful, because that was exactly Pharaoh's response. Let's go, wow. And the Lord wins versus Pharaoh. Wow. And the Lord Jesus wins versus Satan. And Satan bruised Jesus here on the cross, and Jesus died. It looked like Satan was winning. But the sign over Jesus' crucified head did not lie. Jesus is the King. And Jesus crushed Satan's head as he died in our place and triumphed, bursting out of the grave. And we realise the contest never was in doubt. The Lord was always going to win versus Satan. How should we respond to the Lord's victory? Is the ultimate response a VAR review or technical analysis? And those are useful and important. But if the Lord is our creator, he's not a butterfly that we can pin down and say, I've got you now. The ultimate response surely is to hold up our hands and go, wow. I don't know anything that's going on in your lives at the moment. Good things, difficult things. The ultimate response is to worship God. He is the winner. But we've seen first the Lord wins versus Pharaoh. But there is a human perspective as well. Secondly, the Lord wins versus the magicians. He wins versus the magicians. Do you remember when Aaron's stick became a snake? Remember how Pharaoh's taught magicians, presumably by their demonic powers, they also turned their sticks into snakes. And yet their snakes got gobbled up. The Lord wins versus the magicians. And when the Lord turned water into blood, Pharaoh's magicians can do that too. But interestingly, only God can fix it. Okay, so Pharaoh's magicians, they seem to say, look, we found a bit of clean water here. I know. Let's turn that into blood as well. And Pharaoh might say, thanks a lot, guys. Only Moses and Aaron, only the Lord can fix the situation. The Lord wins versus the magicians. And when the Lord turned dust into a plague of gnats, the magicians, they haven't got a hope. They try to copy, but they can't. To chapter 8, verse 18, and you see chapter 8, verse 18, when the magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts, they could not. Since the gnats were on people and animals everywhere, the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. But Pharaoh's heart, he would not listen, just as the Lord had said. So they admit defeat. This is the finger of God. From now on, they don't even try to replicate the plagues. This is the finger of God. Jesus says, if I drive out demons by the finger of God, then the kingdom of God has truly come upon you. In Luke chapter 11. The Lord Jesus wins versus the magicians. Wonder who are the magicians of our age? And they might be actual magicians, not conjurers, like on BBC. I mean, actual, witches. But don't be afraid. The Lord wins. But the Bible makes a difference and more shocking, perhaps, connection between these magicians and our world today. I'm going to read from 2 Timothy chapter 3, where the Apostle Paul is talking about Christian teachers who turn out to be fakes. Christian teachers who, it says, have a form of godliness, but deny power. I'm going to read 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 6, where it's talking about these false teachers who are loaded down with sins and are swayed by all kinds of evil desires. Always learn, but never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. Just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so also these teachers oppose the truth. They are men of depraved minds, who as far as the faith is concerned are rejected. But they will not get very far, because as in the case of these men, their folly will be clear to everyone. What? What's going on here? Who are these guys, Jannes and Jambres? Should it be Jannes? Or go with Jannes? But who are they? It says they opposed Moses. And ancient Jewish documents tell us that these were actually magicians, Pharaoh's magicians, Jannes and Jambres. And they copy Moses by their face, like someone who seeks to copy faithful Christian leaders by their face. Some are famous in their teaching. Verse 8, they oppose the truth. Yes, there are many so-called Christian speakers and authors today who let popular culture or override what the Bible clearly teaches. Or they simply teach what the hearers want to hear to get more followers. Beware. Others are faithless in their living. Verse 6, they worm their way into the lives of vulnerable people. They control them. Sadly, we're all too aware of leaders today who are theologically sound, but who are bullies or abusive. Their face. Now, it's easy to despair, isn't it, at these faithless leaders. But don't despair. The Lord wins versus magicians. They may look genuine for a while, but verse 9, they won't get very far, because their folly will become clear. Don't despair at fake and faithless Christian leaders. Find faithful Christian leaders and copy faithful Christian leaders. And please pray for our leaders, pray for me, pray for our elders, that by God's grace will be preserved from falling greatly and not be unfaithful. Because the Lord wins versus the magicians. Now maybe we think, that's all great, but come on, have you seen my life? Have you seen what's in my diary for this week? How is all this really relevant? For me, tomorrow morning the alarm's going to go. I've got to wake up and face the ordinary challenges of a Monday. How is this relevant? Well, we see first the Lord wins versus Pharaoh, and secondly the Lord wins versus the magicians. Now thirdly and finally, the Lord wins versus all gods. The Lord wins versus all gods. So you might think, sorry, let's turn back to the 7. You might think, well, why the strange selection? Why the water to blood? Why the frogs? Why the gnats? All the other strange plagues? Why did God choose nicer miracles? Because the Lord wins versus all gods. I'm no classicist, but I think from Percy Jackson to Night Shoes to the film Moulin Rouge, the ancient gods pervade contemporary culture. But the Lord wins versus them all. You don't have to know about Egyptian gods to get the plagues, but it does add great colour. Take the Nile, turning the Nile into blood. Apparently, the Egyptians worshipped the Nile. Well, they worshipped the Nile's annual flooding inundation as a god called the god of happy. After all, it makes sense. The Nile was the lifeblood of Egypt. It gave them fertility and prosperity and life. But God briefly turned that symbol of life into a symbol of death, to show the life comes not from the river, but from the Lord who made it. The Lord wins versus all gods. And what about frogs? Why this invasion of frogs? Well, again, apparently, the Egyptians had a frog god apparently he was the god of childbirth, or the god of midwives. Not sure if that's because the babies come hopping out. And the women who were giving birth would wear apparently. And the frog was called Heket. Now remember, Pharaoh had told the Hebrew midwives to kill the baby boys. He had told everyone to drown the Hebrew boys in the river Nile, where the frogs came from. And maybe here's the point. He's showing now who really is the God of childbirth, who really is the God of midwives. The Lord. He wins versus all gods. Now in lots of these plays, there's this connection with an Egyptian god. The Lord wins versus Hathor, the goddess of cows. He wins versus Seth, the god of storms. He wins versus Ray, not a drop of golden sun, but the god of darkness. Now what about the gnats? What's the god of gnats? Well, there isn't a god of gnats. You might think, well, what's going on there? Why did God turn gnats to dust? Well, I guess because the Lord is God of everything. He is the God of things that people worship. The obvious things, money, sex, power, and so on. And He's the God of things that people don't worship, like gnats. Our culture tries to draw a line between our private lives, where they say it's okay to be religious there, and our public lives, where we're supposed to be secular. And I think as Christians we always fall into that trap. We think a lot about being Christian in church and at home, but we struggle to know how to be Christians in work or in our studies or in politics and so on. But the Bible says there is no nook or cranny of creation or culture, of science or the arts, of business or leisure, public or private life, where the Lord is not God. He is God everywhere. He wins versus all gods. So let's turn the details of daily life into moments of worship. And when we turn on the taps, when we remember the birth of a child, when we get eaten by gnats, whatever it is, worship God. And when we struggle with COVID and lockdown, let's remember the Lord is sovereign. Let's remember that in our heads and be encouraged. Let Him drive out fear. And let's remember that in our words. He wins versus the health and prosperity that perhaps some idolize. He wins versus the virus and the implications that we fear. His great comfort. We can face uncertain days because the Lord wins. And here's a great challenge. The Lord is not to be messed with. Mess with Him at our peril. And if the whole point of the Egyptian plagues is that the world may know that God is the Lord, here is a chance to point people from COVID and the other circumstances of our lives, to point people to the God who is Lord, not just of the religious things they may not be interested in, but He is the Lord of everything. Things they are interested in too. To say to people, here are my joys and my sorrows. Here are my hopes and my fears. Here are the failures and successes of my lives. And here is the Lord, who I believe will have the victory in the end. The Lord be with us.